yeah, so this is like some of the stuff I've worked on. League of Legends, Animal Jam was the studio I was at over there for the 3.5 years before I was at Riot Games. And then while I was at Riot, I worked on Powerpuff Girls. I did that for like a month, did some effects designs for them. That was really fun. And VFX Apprentice is the school that I founded while I was working at Riot, and now I'm doing that full time. So I teach people how to animate the elements. So visual effects is a lot of fun. I don't know, let's see. Are we still live? Are you guys still there? I don't know if my Zoom crashed or not. It says I'm still sharing, we're still here. Okay. Sorry. I was like, the window looked different. And so let me just bring this up here for a second. Okay. I can see all there. So anyway, I was getting into this teaching thing because I'm so passionate about animating the elements. I love bringing the fire and the water and the magic to life in animation with particle effects. And it's such a big part, an important part of the game is all of these things. Let's see, I'm wondering if, hey Ricardo, you let me know if this looks good. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. But what I'm gonna try instead is I'm gonna try and do,
Your game problem?
and do this. Does this still look good? Does this work in this format?
Yeah, it looked great. I don't know
Okay.
if you have a problem or something like that.
What was that?
It's
okay.
Working okay? It looked great.
Okay. We'll continue with this then. So basically just a quick overview of visual effects before I dive into the full-blown talk, because a lot of people are a little bit newer to the topic. It's not widely taught, like say character design or 3D modeling or environment construction or even game design. But visual effects is essentially anything that's moving that is not a character. So all the magic, all the fire, all the water, sometimes different props that animate or materials that move and animate on the surface of the 3D models. The surface of the water would be an effect. Also, clouds in the sky might be an effect. All those kinds of things that are animated but are not characters. And so we end up wearing a lot of different hats and we do a big variety of stuff. And also we get to do the big moments, you know, the moment where the big building explodes or where, you know, the bad guy is powering up and he's like filling up with all this crazy energy and electricity is flying everywhere. Or, you know, when the good guy, you know, finally gets the weapon of power that's going to defeat evil and there's this big glowy magical sequence. All of that is the visual effects artist's job to really impress the player and to make it epic and awesome and very satisfying. On League of Legends, a lot of the focus that we had was making it very clear what was going on. So when the ability fires off, you need to see the area of effect, the ring around that ability, or the line if it's a line shot or a cone. And you need to see on the character if they're like glowing and pulsing with red, that looks like damage. Or if it's like green, then maybe they're being healed. All those kinds of things, figuring out how to animate that and to color it and to create the shapes, that all falls on my shoulders as a visual effects artist to make sure that it looks right. Okay, so what am I going to be talking about today? So today I'm just going to share some insights from the VFX Apprentice class. And this is the Booms and Blasts class that's currently available on vfxapprentice.com. So I'm going to share a lot of artwork from there. Now, when I was going through this, I had this whole exercise that I thought it would be really fun to share with everyone, kind of behind the scenes of what we had to go through just even to build a project for a class. We had to like think of all these same things that we think of inside of the studio, which is like, you know, unifying the style and all these kinds of things. Oops. So the challenge. Okay, so the first thing is we need to make all of these elements work together, right? We've got fire, electricity, smoke, and slime. And this is not an easy challenge, right? We've got all kinds of crazy stuff that doesn't look like other stuff, but we need to make it look correct in the same project. Now, even in real life, these 4 elements are very, very different. You look at these 4 pictures, they don't look like the same video game, but they're all the same reality. So this is what's happening in the world all the time, but they don't really quite fit together. And it was my challenge to try and understand, okay, how am I going to use all the knowledge that I had from working in the industry for all these years, now that I have my own project to be the art director myself, how am I going to make these visual effects all come together? So one of the big challenges of making all of these fit together is going to be like, you know, the methods and the techniques and the artistic approach that we take to unify all that. So, you know, looking at these more close up, let's look at the, like, what are these things even made of, right? So when you think about it, they're all different materials. I mean, you look at what is actual fire. Fire is, you know, some kind of like a plasma, right? It's burning carbon that's oxidating very rapidly and creating a chemical reaction with the air. You know, what is electricity? Well, electricity is, you know, electrons that are zipping across this, you know, the air and rapidly connecting to something and bridging on the other side. It's not even made of the same stuff as fire. And then smoke is, you know, a mixture of all kind of particulates that are in the air. And then slime is like some kind of crystalline structure that, like a silicone or like a, you know, some kind of saturated with moisture crystalline structure that becomes loose and slimy that can also break and stretch, all those kinds of things. So here we go, you know, with flames, you've got carbon dioxide, water vapor, oxygen, and nitrogen. Electricity is just moving electrons. Smoke is mostly water vapor, but has some small particles and gases. And then slime is a crystalline or gel compound blended with water. So, okay, that's not really helpful. Knowing that they're made from completely different things, as an artist, I'm like, okay, what am I going to use to make them in the game engine? So when I'm looking in the game engine itself, I mean, I'll let you look at this slide for a little while. There's so many different techniques as an effects artist. And for anyone who's very new to visual effects, you know, you can see stuff like this and you start thinking, oh, this is so complicated. How can I ever learn how to do this, right? It's so technical, it's so difficult. But the beauty is that something that my life's mission right now is to make this more simple. And we're going to give away access to my class, this class that we're talking about now in this presentation. And so if you don't get in on that, you know, you can look into it and purchasing it later. You can email me at the end. I'll have my email address for you. And we can talk about, if you're interested in getting into this and facing the complexity, and it's really not as scary as it looks, I promise. But you can see the point is that there's so much variation. There's so many different ways that you can do just one thing. Like, you know, we have, you know, the material here that looks all fiery and stuff, and it takes that mesh and it deforms it. You've got much simpler mesh here that's just a little bit wavy, that has a material shimmering up. Here you've got an electric bolt that is multiple meshes that are sort of zigzagged, that are turning on in different positions as to make it look like it's animating. And then over here you've got material editor, which in Unreal Engine, if anyone's used Unreal Engine here, you are very familiar with how this material editor works. to create different types of looks. I mean, you can do almost anything with it. It's really nice. Okay, so what are some ways to unify it, right? Well, the first solution that comes to mind is to use one artist to set the vision of how everything is going to look. And I know that by having just one artist, it makes it a lot simpler later on to try and get everything to look like one person made it if you start out with just one artist working on this. Okay, so what I did is I went to my good friend, David Shevlin, and I said, hey, you are an amazing concept artist. Please, oh please, can you make some beautiful artwork for the class, and then we'll record you doing it, and then we'll teach people how to do that. So in the class, we have tutorials for these 4 images that David Shevlin did of watching how he painted that from beginning to end. And in my opinion, this is a very critical part of being a good visual effects artist. You really need to have an understanding of how to compose a painting or an image, or at least a sketch of your effect, if you want to be able to sort of art direct yourself and control what you're creating artistically. So David Shevlin does a great job. He is a great concept artist. He's also a great visual effects animator, and he also teaches some of the lessons in the class on how to create these in 3D. So he goes through and he's making all of these, and even though they are very different elements, they all look like they belong together now all of a sudden. Like, by having one artist do all of them, they start to look like they're in the same style. If I had 4 different artists do 4 different paintings, they would probably look like they belonged in 4 different games. And I think this is a mistake that's very easy to make on projects, is you might delegate many different people to do the early concept art, and then the game has a hard time being very distinct and being very clear of what the style is, because it has so many different artistic visions, so many different people's opinions on what it should look like. So by having David do all of these, already the project starts to come into a cohesion, so that everything else that we do in the class, all the other effects that we make, can feel similar to these and tie together really nicely. All right. So by having one artist, it's also valuable to remember that you want that one artist to do a big variety. So when that artist is working, you don't want them to do a fire explosion and a fire burning and then a fireball missile that's flying. Like, you don't want to just have them do a lot of very similar things. You want to have them do very, very different things. And here I'm showing some examples from RTFX. That's a great, they have like a great channel on ArtStation, and also over on DeviantArt. I recommend checking their stuff out. They have really cool effects. But there's 2 different elements here that are very, very different from each other, done by the same artist. And so you can start getting a bigger idea of what you're working on to start on totally different types of elements, so that when other artists pick it up later on, they can start from a point on, oh, well, this is what the fire explosion looks like. So from that, maybe a fireball might look like this, and they can kind of build on that style, but it will at least feel like it matches and fits together. It feels more unified that way. All right. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is philosophy. So this idea was presented to me while I was working at Riot Games about pillars. And we all know what a style guide is. It's something to help us define the style and to get everyone, some nice pictures about what it's looking like. Pillars are something that you build before you have a style guide. Oftentimes, it's hard to get a good style guide until you've already started building the project. And so you need something to help you out before you even start building the project. And pillars, I think, are a great answer to that. So what are pillars? Well, pillars are like the structure that your whole game is going to stand on visually. So what are the important things that are going to inform everything? So just a few things, maybe 2 or 3 things, that's all. And those things matter more than everything else, and they have to matter more, because if everything matters, then you get the problem that you see here, which is where people think everything is important, and then they're very confused, and they start wasting time because they're trying things that don't matter, but they think that it might matter because it's on the list of 50 things that are supposed to matter, right? So don't worry about the 50 things. Just worry about the couple of pillars that do matter. So let's see here. I'm going to go away for a second because I've got an idea of some example pillars. Now, this is a valuable lesson to look at because you can see all of these things on here might apply to your game. And they're all really cool, right? And they're all really important. Like, things need to feel grounded to the world. Okay, so like whatever the world looks like, the effects need to look like they fit in that world. Well, if you look at Zelda Breath of the Wild, those effects don't look like the world, right? So the world is one kind of texture and material, and then the visual effects are something totally different. So they didn't have this pillar, and they felt like it wasn't as important. Okay, packed with personality. So you want your effects to feel like they have emotion, like, you know, it's really a happy effect or it's really a sad one or whatever. Well, that sounds cool. Okay, flashes of awe, things that make you go, whoa, that was so cool, so pretty, right? Integrated with the action. So like every little sword swipe, when it contacts something, it does a little spark, and there's like a little swoosh of air behind the sword as it swings through the air, you know, and every time something touches something else, there's a little spark, a little dust puff or something like that. Okay, we can make sure we do that. Punch you in the face. Wow, okay, so really, really big and impressive stuff that really grabs your attention. Compelling spectacles. All right, that's kind of like punch you in the face, but maybe bigger, right? Like this is like the large scale stuff that's just massive on the screen. It takes up the whole screen and it's just blowing you away. The bare essence. Yeah, we also want the bare essence. We want it to be a compelling spectacle and have just the bare essence of it, the basic part of whatever that effect is boiled down to its core. Well, you can start to see already just from the first column, if we try to do all of these with just one effect, I'll come back here for you. If we just try to do all of these with only one effect, it's going to be hard. It's going to be confusing. It's going to take a lot of time. The team is going to be arguing a lot because they'll say, oh, no, this one needs to be punch you in the face. And someone else is like, no, it needs to be integrated with the action. And how can we make it both? And the more pillars you have, the worse your game will be. And the more frustrating your game will be. So I think simple is better. I think to simplify your pillars down to just 2, or if it's a bigger game, maybe 3. But most games are small enough, like especially if you're doing an indie game or a mobile game or just a small scope game, you shouldn't need more than 2 pillars for your effects style. Like, what matters with the visual effects? Well, just 2 things matter with the visual effects, and that's it. And then you can figure out what's great about this is you can start creating a style guide from that. So because you have just the 2 things that matter, now you can start to say, well, we also know what does not matter. So in a meeting, when someone's showing something up on the screen, it's very simple. It's like, okay, so you thought that it was important to make it cute and bubbly. Okay, well, because you made it cute and bubbly, it's not punchy. Now, punchy was one of our pillars, and you did something that's not a pillar. So that's a very simple solution. Just don't do that thing. Make it punchy instead. Don't make it cute and bubbly, make it punchy. You can do cute and bubbly in another game, and that can be a pillar for another game, but here that's not what's important, and so we cut it. So once you have that clarity of what you're trying to do, the team can get aligned, you know what's important. This is a screenshot from the League of Legends style guide. You can find that online. It's really fantastic guide. We have the whole visual effects team's learnings on how to make effective visual effects for League of Legends. And so you can kind of check that out. And it becomes very simple to create a style guide once you have really strong pillars. Okay, so that was pillars. The next one is to use consistent techniques. And I say where possible because sometimes when you're making effects, you need to use a variety of techniques, and that can be really challenging. Before I go into this, I guess it's like, if it's fine, are people in the chat, I should like probably just be reading the chat. Are people in here keeping up with this all right? Does anyone have any questions? I mean, feel free to like chime in, and then maybe Ricardo can like let me know what some of the questions are.
They had a lot of questions, but I think that the best is that we do it at the final of the presentation because they are not necessarily aligned to the presentation. For example, it's necessary animate or should the drawings, the drugs of the concept artist animated? It's like that kind of question. I don't know if you can answer.
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Is it necessary
So
to
the
animate?
drawings of the concept artist animated, I'm going to write it because it's more easy for me.
So when they show the concept art, is it necessary to write down what they're going to do?
Yeah, I suppose that the question is, when you work with an artist and he make a lot of drawings, you need to animate it, or it's not necessary for do a VFX effectively?
Yeah, so when I work with a concept artist, they draw it and it does not animate, and then it's my job to make it animated.
Okay. But
so
how is the workflow? He make just a random draw of a specific VFX, or it's like he make a lot of draws?
Oh, yeah. So it depends on the effect, and it depends on the artist. Sometimes an artist will do lots of different images, lots of different drawings to see maybe it's this way, maybe it's that way. We'll try this out, try that out. Other times they'll do multiple drawings of the same effect. So they'll do when it first hits, and then they'll do when it's breaking apart. So they'll do two drawings of two different moments in that same animation. So sometimes they'll do like lots of different ideas, like what if it was red, what if it was purple, what if it had sharp shapes, what if it had round shapes, all that stuff. So that's one way that they'll make lots of different drawings. Another time, if it's hard to see, how's it going to look when it hits, and then how's it going to look when it's breaking apart? So they'll draw the hit and the break apart.
Okay.
Two different drawings. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Cool.
Another question is, in the VFX, what is the fundamental or the base of the knowledge that you suggest we start learning from? It's like when you start with the drugs, you need to learn about anatomy. And what is the base of the VFX?
The best place to go would be Joseph Gillen's book. Let me see if I can pull this up here. So if you just want the theory of how to animate effects, this book is the best. So this is Elemental Magic, and it is written by Joseph Gilland. That's squished. I don't know why they squish it on here. But he has classic art on here from Disney. And, he just talks about all these things, designing these shapes, studying real life effects and elements, and all of the theory and philosophy behind this. This is a really great book to pick up if this is something that you want to pursue. The book is great because it teaches you all of the principles, but it's up to you to go and practice animating. It doesn't have any lessons. It just only talks about the theories and the philosophies. but I really, really like this book. Yeah, it talks about like, you know, motion and direction and currents and things. What I did when I first read this book was I would pause on a page and I would draw the pictures on that page in my sketchbook. And it was really useful for me. Yeah, practicing drawing all these shapes is very, very useful to an effects artist. Yeah.
Okay.
Also, my class, once if that book is interesting to you and you feel like it gets you excited and you want to learn more, then my class would be the next step. So my class would be, you know that you want to learn visual effects, and then you would sign up and learn more that way. And we have subtitles in Spanish in the class. So so more ways to get this style to feel consistent and cohesive would be to use consistent techniques. So when you're looking at different ways that you can paint your textures, these are different textures that we would use in a visual effect in 3D, right? And these textures tile top to bottom. So like right here, you can see this white spot matches up with that white spot. And over here, this matches with that. And so it will tile over and over again, side to side and top to bottom. And all four of these textures do that, right? But now the thing is that these two textures were created with a computer. So I believe this is created in Substance. Substance can create textures like this. And then these up here were hand painted, and I painted these. So I just painted these in Photoshop with a white brush on black, right? And then smudge, and I blurred it and then painted some more and that kind of thing. Now, if some of your textures are created using this technique over here, procedural in Substance, and then some others are created using these hand-painted ones, the effects are not going to match. They're going to look like there are two different styles that belong in two different games. Now, I'm not saying that one way is better or another way is worse. I think depending on the game you're working on, they're both really good, right? So I wouldn't worry about that at all. But what I would say is, for one game, only use one method. Don't try to use many different methods when you could just do it one way and make it more consistent. And we did run into this on League of Legends because we had so many artists, and we had like 20 visual effects artists. And for a long time, that's a lot of VFX artists, by the way. That's way more than usual for a game. Usually a game only has like maybe one or two visual effects artists. But we had all of these artists, and they had all different ways of creating effects. And sometimes an artist would create something that looked very different from another artist, so much that it looked like it belonged in a different game. And we ran out of time, and we just had to ship it and launch that content. And it was really bad because then we had like all these different effects that looked wrong next to each other. And we had to fix that over years. It took us to go back and fix old effects and make them so that they look like they fit together. And nowadays they have more standardized ways of working, but in the early days, they were doing it a lot, like any different way that they wanted to. And it was really making it look bad. So here's an example in game. Like, these are both sort of like gooey liquid things. One on the top is created with like a procedural method, right? Where the material like sort of, you know, dissolves, and it like flows across this like map that you determine, and it procedurally figures out how the bubbles fit and look. And then on the bottom, this is a flip book that I made underneath hand-painted clouds. And so by just hand drawing goo and then making that goo dissolve away with a hand-drawn style, it's going to look like it belongs in a completely different game than if you use the procedural method. And so this is also good because as an artist, you might have a preference, right? You might enjoy working on this type of thing, and this gets you really excited to say, yeah, I want to do procedural materials that dynamically update and they can work in any environment. And that sounds really fun to me. And you love working in the node graph and getting all that to work. Or you might be the kind of artist that you say, I hate technology. I hate like really complex things. What I want to do is hand-drawn artistic art all the way. And so you might want to create something more like this that is very handcrafted. It's like it looks like a moving painting, like an animated painting, and that could be the way that you go. And when we say PBR, that's physically based rendering. So that basically means in a video game, you have like lights that are shining on surfaces, and it's like a physical, like it's based on like physical real world things. Like it has reflection, it has roughness, it has all these different ways that it catches light and casts shadow and those sorts of things. So when we say PBR or like next gen, it's basically saying the light is shining and the shadows are being cast and the reflections and all that, as opposed to, you know, texture driven. So in League of Legends, there's no lights, which is kind of weird to say. Everything is hand painted, and it just, anytime there's a highlight, it's because we painted in a little highlight. There's no actual like reflection bouncing off of those materials. Although lately they're starting to experiment with that, and you're starting to see that kind of thing come in, but that's really gradual. They want to keep the style the same. Okay, cross-pollination between artists. So this is another great way to unify things, is to teach each other and to share knowledge and information with each other. Now here's some other websites. This also goes to the earlier question. I'm gonna just go away so I'm out of the way. This goes to the earlier question about how to get started. I really recommend that you go to realtimevfx.com. There's a great community over there, and you can browse through the forum and say, hey, I'm new here, where do I go? They have really great stuff posted by artists at League of Legends and breakdowns of how this is all working. This is a post by Shannon Burke. She's really, really awesome and really knows her stuff. So there's lots of people over there that can help out. Also, you can share things within your studio. This meetup that you're doing right now is perfect for knowledge sharing. I think it's a great idea to meet with other like-minded people about how you can collaborate together, right? Talk about it, workshop it. You can do it by Zoom, you can share your screen. Hey, I was thinking of doing it this way or that way. And then there's the bigger conferences, and GDC is a great one. If you can't make it to GDC, stuff like this is fantastic. These are images from GDC a couple years ago where everyone in this room is a visual effects artist. So they are out there, they do exist, but they're just kind of rare and not as common as we would like. But, you know, we meet up as often as we can. Okay, so the result. By doing all this work and sharing all this knowledge and information and trying to get it to come together, the class came together pretty nicely. So I'm sorry this isn't the best frame rate. It's pretty cool how it turned out. You can go and see on our website, you can see these animated at the full frame rate. But yeah, you can tell that they all belong in the same game together, and they're very cohesive, even though they're made of completely different things. And I'm really, really happy with how the team helped this turn out. And then in the class, these are the 4 things that you get to animate, along with some other lessons as well. You get the source assets, so you get to actually get the Unreal file and the Unity project. So we have it built in Unreal and in Unity, and you can get these files and study them and use them in your own work and figure out how they function. And you get all the videos instructing you on that. Also, there's a community of us in the website. There's 450 students that have signed up so far, and they're on Discord, and there's a forum as well inside the class that we have for sharing knowledge about how to do all this stuff. Okay, so the wrap up. Talked about how to have a single artist, having a good style philosophy, using consistent techniques, and then cross-pollination between artists, and how that's all valuable. All right, so here's how you get a hold of me. I'll come back over here. So I'm on lots of things. You can just email me directly. I would love to hear from you. Google Translate is our friend.